Welcome to another edition of Trail Runner Nation. My name is Don Freeman.
And I'm Scott Warr. And today we're going to talk about the foundation of every step you take, your foot arch. We're thrilled to welcome back Dr. Matthew Silver. He's a physical therapist and the author of a book that if you don't have on your shelf, you need to get it. It's called Built to Run, The Runner's Guide to Fixing Common Injuries, Resolving Pain, and Optimizing Running Performance, now and for life. In this episode, we're going to explore the function of the arch, why it matters, and how the big toe plays a crucial role in the foot health and running efficiency. Dr. Silver will guide us through practical ways to activate and strengthen our arches, shedding light on how different shoe types, especially the trend of high stack shoes, impact our feet over time. In this episode will help you make smarter choices for long-term running performance. Welcome again,
thanks, Scott.
Dr. Matt Silver.
A little bit of a preface here. I mean, a lot of this info is in Built to Run, but I just actually started outlining a new book I have. I want to say the name yet, but it is focused on arches and feet. Like it's all it's going to be on. So listeners, you guys too, but everyone listening to this is going to get a little sneak peek of some things that are going to be in that book. So I'm excited. This should be a good talk.
Well, but let's start out with the question. The one that comes to mind first is, what is the arch?
That's like the golden question, right? Like, what are the arches of our feet? Because we get told so often, you have a flat foot, your arch is too high, you have a neutral foot. Like, what does all that mean? The arch is this amazing. I mean, I see it this way. It's this masterpiece of engineering while also being this amazing work of art. I mean, maybe I'm a big nerd about it, but that's the way I see the foot. It's this thing that separates us from like primates and monkeys and gorillas, where it's made for locomotion, for us to be bipedal on 2 feet. When we're running, running is probably the best example because it's just, I mean, a lot of people listening to this probably do a lot of hiking and running. It's when you're on the ground, you probably spend maybe at most like 0.25 seconds within that time frame. Typically it's less than that. When you run faster, it's even less. But in that time frame, your foot hits the ground. It has to it acts as a shock absorber. The arch is the shock absorber. Your whole body technically is, but your whole leg is. But the arch is a massive shock absorber that absorbs force. And then I say a split second, 0.1 seconds later, it has to turn into a steel strut that is stiff enough for us to be able to push off from. And if the arch doesn't do its job, which we could talk about, why that may happen, but if it's not able to be that steel strut at the end or this shock absorber in the beginning, that's when we tend to have problems. But the arch is designed, it's engineered to do this. And when we think about it this way, it happens so fast. Every step we take when we run, it's like 0.25 seconds. It's a shock absorber really quick. And all of a sudden now it's a steel strut we push off from, but creates a stable lever. That's what the arch is. The arch allows us to be bipedal. When we look at primates, which is our closest relatives, this is what I get into in the new book, but essentially in our closest relative, like they're not bipedal. Like, yeah, they can stand for a little bit, but they have like opposable thumbs where we have this big toe that presses into the ground that gives us this amazing arch.
So let's talk about the arch as runners. What if we have a weak arch? Maybe I should start with, how do we know if we have a weak arch before we talk about why it's so important as runners and how it might affect how we run? How do we even know that we have a weak arch?
Yeah, a good way to tell is there's
some
some tests we can do, but an easy way is like if you've had plantar fasciitis, or I call it plantar fasciosis. If you've had that for a while and it seems to just, you do some stuff, it goes away and then it comes back. If you've had like a posterior tibial tendon issue, which I used to have that myself, or Achilles tendinosis that's not going away. A lot of times, if you have these like chronic foot and ankle issues, sometimes it can be hip and knee issues. But if you have this plantar fasciosis that's just not going away, that could be a sign of, hey, we need this. You might not be activating your arches and your foot might not be doing what it's supposed to do. But a simple test that I love to do is, I do this all the time with my patients and clients that I see in person and virtually, is, hey, have a seat. Can you do toe yoga? Do you guys know what that is? Where like you press so essentially this is my foot, right? you press the big toe down, four toes go up, and then other four toes go down, big toe goes up. It just lets me know, and you know, that you have some level of motor control. Your brain's able to separate your big toe from your other four toes. But I want you to be able to also, can you, while standing or seated, can you press your big toe, or can you press it down, not scrunch it, but can you press it into the ground and see and feel your arch activate? If it's hard to press it down, or you have problems with the toe yoga, or you can't feel or see your arch, that also is that's a test I do to see, hey, where's your arch activation at?
Good. Well,
wait. I want to know, Don. Do you have shoes on right now? Were you doing it?
I did my yoga, and I found out I'm a yoga master on the right side. On the left side,
I'm better on the left side.
Well, together we've got a decent set of legs.
Yeah.
What about shin splints? I mean, you listed off a few things, but if a person was battling with shin splints, they have a history of it.
100%.
Should they consider
there
their
are
arch?
two different kinds of shin splints. One that's in the front of the shin, that's not going to have as much of it definitely plays a role, but the one that's on like the inside near the calf muscle, like kind of where the calf and the bone meet on that inside, that one, it's a little bit more challenging to treat. That one would really benefit from arch activation, because that tendon, that's the posterior tib tendon, it wraps around the arch, and if you have a lack of arch control, that tendon, it gets overstretched. Essentially it has excessive strain on it, which is load under stretch, and that tends to cause posterior tib issues, but also that like we call it medial shin splints or inside shin splints.
Hey, and Matt, many of us that are listening to this podcast have read the book Born to Run, which kind of spurred an insurgence of trail running and running in general. And one of the things that they talk about in that book, they get into barefoot running, and they talk about the arch as this beautifully engineered piece of machinery and an artful design, like you were saying. But they said you need to leave it alone. You don't want to put something, you have this arch, this bridge, you don't want to put something underneath it like an orthotic or an arch support, because then it doesn't have the ability to be that shock absorber, and you're losing that ability for the arch to do what it's designed to do.
That is,
what's your thought on that?
Big can of worms, but I want to tackle it because it's important. And there's going to be, I think I'm going to talk about something and go off on a tangent, Don and Scott. So bring me back to the arch, because there's a few points I want to hit on here. One thing is this, that when I guess we can get into insoles, we might as well get into orthotics and stuff. So like when we look at orthotics, there's 4 groups. I like to think there's like 3 of them. Actually, I have them in front of me too. I'm glad I grabbed these. My wife actually cleaned the house today, and I was like, shoot, where did the orthotics go? So I actually grabbed them right before this started. But you have, like, this is what you're talking about, Scott. It's rigid. I can't really twist. I mean, this will support me. I can't bend this at all unless I break it. But I mean, this is like the one you'd get from a podiatrist, and this has a benefit. To me, the big benefit, I mean, realistically, the benefit of this orthotic is sometimes someone's foot it's a little bit kind of twisted out to the side. So in order to get your foot to have a good push off, it's going to have to collapse down. So sometimes, and I'll recommend this for patients, hey, we could build this inside part up a little bit, just so you hit, essentially it helps you keep a more neutral foot position. I tend not to recommend this too much unless somebody has that. And there's other things I give that are just, you don't have to spend $200 on an orthotic like this. There's also these ones, which are kind of like in between. I think this is a Curex. There's like a plastic arch support here that I can bend this. Like this is not going to hold up when you're running. There's 200%, 250% of your body weight every step you take. Force equivalent, this is going to bend. But the research is very clear, guys, that this and this, they actually do something that benefits you, because so many runners have been like, well, Matt, if these aren't doing much, well, like I put this in my shoe and my plantar fasciitis feels better. My plantar fasciosis, feels better. My posterior tib tendinosis, my pain is gone. My Achilles tendon feels better. What are these actually doing? And the research is very clear. It's giving you a proprioceptive response. It's giving you feedback. when you're on this, it doesn't matter if this little plastic thing that's going to mold or this thing that's rigid, it's not going to move. Your arch senses that, and then it sends a signal to your brain that says, oh, there's there's something on your foot, and it's actually going to help activate your arch muscles. It doesn't matter what shoe you're in, from a Hoka to a Zero barefoot, it's going to help you get your arches more active. So just the fact of wearing these, we're essentially, these are helping, but they're not helping for the reason we think they are. And this, we were talking beforehand about, well, we have these super rigid orthotics. This is kind of like in between. Some insoles are they're just soft, and sometimes my heel hurts when I hit the ground because we lose the fat pad when we get older. That's a benefit too. But the third kind, I can show you guys too. It's called a proprioceptive insole, where this actually it's not forcing your foot in a position. It's not trying to give you an arch. It just gives you a little bit of feedback, and there's a little bump here, and there's this thing you can take in and out. You can put a bigger one or a thinner or a smaller one in. Gives you some feedback that tells your arch, ooh, there's something here. I need to raise my arch up and activate my big toe and my toes. So I essentially, when you're talking about insoles and orthotics, most of the benefit is proprioceptive, and there's this one company, they have this trademark, so I don't think anyone else can make this. They just decided to go all in and make a proprioceptive insole that I wear myself. I am a huge fan of this. But to get back to your question, Scott, most of the benefit from insoles. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Before you go there, before you go to that point, yeah. What's the name of that, and where can people find it? Because if they're listening and to the podcast, they're going, I'm not sure what he's doing right now because they're not watching.
They're either out of Australia or Europe, and I've been chatting with the owner of it, so I apologize if I get that wrong. But I know they have a U.S. branch. I actually have it in the link in my bio on Instagram, which you feel free to check it, click it. I don't get any money from it. I just believe in this company. I use it myself. This has helped me get my arches active. So definitely check out Barefoot Science. They have a couple of different models, but the whole theory is you start with like one that's not as thick, and then over time you just take the thinner one out, put a thicker one in. You just do that every week, every 2 weeks. And over time, it's always giving you that feedback that I think we're not really placing much of an emphasis on. The old school model is, make the foot form to this perfect structure where every foot's going to be different. Some people have a little higher arches, some people have lower arches, just from the way your foot is structured. But that doesn't mean we can't get this foot active. And I'm a much bigger fan of, and the research supports this. Let's have you learn how to turn your arches on, and a proprioceptive insole is a great way to do that. We're just not trying to shove the foot in a position and like stabilize it with all this stiff material.
Matt, is that because we're so used to wearing manufactured shoes? Because I'm trying to think, naturally, our arches, if we're out on the savannah running to catch an antelope, I think that our arches would know and be able to be proprioceptive enough to know when to activate. Why do we need this now? Is it because we've trained our feet since we were 3 years old to be in this rigid shoe?
Yeah,
and we need to reteach ourselves.
We need to come out of the coffin. I think that's probably a big part of it. I think it's almost like, imagine you had a glove on your hand, right, your whole life, and you couldn't grip anything. You just, or maybe you wore it, for I don't know, 16 or 12 hours, 16 hours of the day. Of course, our hand would be deconditioned. It'd be hard that we wouldn't be as nimble and lose a lot of dexterity. I think the same thing is part of it is, even if you're in a shoe like a Zero or you're in a big Hoka, the stimulus you're getting from the ground, it's going to be the same every step you take. And I like this insole because I guess technically it is the same, but it's always this thing it's pushing up on you, and it helps activate your arches. Where if we were, I'm not saying advocating go run around your downtown city barefoot, but if we have this constantly varied stimulus of you're running on grass, and then you're on a rock, then you're on gravel, then there's a root over there, and I'm sure we'd have calluses on our feet that would help us from getting injured, but I think that has a lot to, like, if you're running on all these different variable surfaces, you're going to get more feedback to your brain. That's going to help. It's just going to, I think of it like the symphony of just information that's helping your foot engage and adapt. And, there's this big root, and now you're on flat land. Now there's an uphill, there's a downhill, and there's uneven surfaces. I think that has a massive benefit just keeping the arch strong and healthy. And this is just something that it's hard to get that during our daily lives. Like I live in a city downtown. I go in the woods a good amount to hike, but it's my feet are, I can't go run on gravel. It's going to hurt my feet. Maybe I could. That's, I hope that answers your question, Scott, but that's my kind of theory of kind of why I think we're having such issues with activating arches.
Number one, I appreciate how you brought all of these props to this podcast. You've got shoes handy. I don't know where you're going to go or how much, like that magician that has that top hat that he just keeps pulling stuff out of. And I think that's what's happening here. So Scott, I was with you when you were talking about, we've evolved over time, and now from 3 years old, we're moving forward, and that's why we have poor arches. But some people have very flat feet with a lot of pronation where they're turning in, and some people have very high arches, and we all started wearing shoes at 3. So is there a genetic piece to this, or some changes in the bone structure or the cartilage itself, or the different types of plasticity to some of the ligaments? How can you explain the differences in humans when we pretty much do the same stuff from 3 years old?
Right? Like what you're born with. And I think
right. And I don't expect you to have the answer, Doctor.
There's definitely
I don't know.
like a gender
that's a good one.
difference. I think, at least from what I've seen and what I remember, women tend to have higher arches. Men tend to have flatter feet, lower arches. But one thing that I remember learned, this stuck with me, because I have flat feet myself, and when I grew up distance running, they were like, you need these stability shoes. You have flat feet, Matt. So I always thought I was pigeonholed into this one kind of running shoe. But the later, like last night I ran my zeros and I had no issue, and it was fantastic. That's what I was going to get at. So when I was in physio school, I learned that like when we're growing, and my wife is due mid-December, so my son's on the way, and I'm definitely going to have my son. He's going to have a lot of barefoot time. Yes, I want to make sure he's not outside on the grass. I want to make sure there's no glass or nothing. I want to make sure he's going to be safe with it, obviously, but like there are milestones that babies that they like. I believe like 2 or 3 years when they start to walk. There's a milestone that I think there's like 6-7 years their arch fully develops. Like when you have a newborn, like the feet are completely flat. They are 100% flat. We start to develop the arch as we start to walk. And I think it actually goes. I believe it overshoots and then it corrects itself. Like I think once a toddler was at like that year and a half or 2 years, like walking or before that, my pediatric PT knowledge is a little bit lacking. But whenever babies they're becoming toddlers and they start walking, the arch starts to develop. I believe it overshoots and they have an excessively high arch. Then it corrects and goes to this like essentially the neutral kind of arch position we're shooting for. What I think may happen is if we are wearing more restrictive shoes, we don't get that feedback to just to have these robust arches. I think that could be one part of it. So I'm a huge. I want to look more in the research on that, which is especially for the book coming up. But I that has to be a key factor in this. Is how, like when you were in these developmental stages where your arch is developing from the first moment you start walking to around, I believe it's like 6, 7, 8 years old. That's an important time frame to start to develop arches. And yes, men tend to have lower arches, women tend to have higher arches. But I think this is something I think it's overlooked. I think a lot of just if you have a newborn or if you have kids, give them some just barefoot time, not just on the carpet or wood floor, but if you could get outside at all. I don't even call it grounding. Just get on some grasses, knobby, and there's little rough edges, and just get some barefoot time in. Jump, run, sideway cut, do whatever you can barefoot, because I think it's going to really help develop some strong feet.
Interesting as time moves on, as from non-weight bearing to weight bearing humans, infants or toddlers don't have a kneecap yet. The patella isn't developed. You reach down there and you look for it. It's not there. It all of a sudden starts to form as they start to put a weight bearing demand on their body, and then it starts to be created. So it's an interesting thing how our body adapts to different stresses. And with that said, with the changes and adaptations, I want to talk a little bit about something very close to the arch, and that's a bunion. Let's talk a little bit about how that change occurs with someone maybe without an arch. Scott, go ahead. Did you want to answer that?
I don't, but I want to add more of a clarifying
Yeah.
question. I don't even know what a bunion is. I've heard of them. I think it's something hard. I don't think I've ever had one. What is
Yeah.
a bunion? And then answer Don's question.
Yeah. So Dr. Silver,
Yeah.
obviously Scott's not going to answer it because he's not sure what it is.
Yeah. So the bunion
he
is
disclosed
essentially
that. Go ahead.
like a callus formation on the on the inside edge of inside base of the first metatarsal. Essentially, it's the first joint of the big toe. It tends to be accompanied by the toe being angled in. But essentially, the bunion itself, if we look at what is a bunion, it's just this it's like a callousy, bony growth on the on that inside edge of the base of the first metatarsal. Do you guys have a bunion? I'm just curious, Scott or Don.
Okay.
Okay.
No,
Okay.
no.
And,
I don't.
and there is
I've
a
never
lot
had
of
one,
misconception. Like I remember watching YouTube videos of like these podiatrists and have a lot of subscribers, and they're like bunions 100% genetic, and there is a genetic component, but there 100% is a factor of we've been wearing tight restrictive shoes, and it's hands down a contributing to the bunion, but also it's something. It's called. It's essentially the bunion isn't the big toe deformation where it angles in. The bunion is simply just that growth. So when someone's like, it typically happens in elderly women. They tend to have these more severe, like the big toe is really angled in because they've worn high heels for for a long time and tight restrictive shoes. That's called a hallux valgus deformity, where it's actually the big toe actually doesn't have much of the deformity. It's actually the first metatarsal. So when we look at our foot, essentially it's kind of like right where the bones that make up like the top part of the arch. The first is on the inside, and there's 1 through 5 for each. Each toe has its own metatarsal. That first metatarsal, it's actually twisted. Actually, it twists in and then it angles in as well. It twists in and it angles out. So what ends up happening is when that first metatarsal twists in, the big toe will also twist in with it. So that's why it gets that angle. But also, as that first metatarsal kicks out, the big toe will then compensatorily kick in. So someone can actually have the bunion without having the big toe being twisted and moved and kind of kicked sideways. And when we look at like what causes a hallux valgus, like the bunion can be from the like stiffness in just narrow shoes and narrow toe boxes that just you got a wide foot, you're in a narrow shoe. By hands down, there's definitely a genetic component. I'm not going to discount that. But when we look at the hallux valgus of this big toe that looks like it's twisted and it's angled in towards the other 4 toes, like how does that happen? That's from a lack of stability in your foot. I know Jay have a question, Don, but one more thing I want to add on is there's this theory that I'm a big fan of. It's called the foot core theory, that your core, right, when you deadlift, you have to have an active core or you might tweak your back. Like your core has to have activation to stabilize your spine. The same thing happens with your foot, where you have to have foot activation. Your intrinsic foot muscles have to be active to stabilize your foot. If they're not active, then we can have a lot of these, plantar fasciosis and Achilles tendon issues. But I'm a big believer that a lot of the like hallux valgus and bunion issues, yes, we want to make sure we're in wider shoes and toe spacers, all that good stuff. But if we can have a strong, active intrinsic foot muscles and a strong foot, I think that can really help with someone who has this hallux valgus, which is that big toe that's angled in.
So if I have flat feet and I have it's overpronation, and so I'm thinking, you know what, I'm going to experiment, get myself an orthotic, and provide some proprioceptive feedback. I'm going to support that arch. I'm going to really effort this and try to change it. Are we at risk of becoming dependent or reliable or relying on this support? Are we deconditioning muscles when we're providing a support to artificially do what our otherwise our muscles would do in that arch?
Yeah, if you're using the proprioceptive, so I wouldn't say
Does that make
support.
sense?
I would just say you're just giving it feedback. So and no, you're not. Like this right here, like when I take this off, I walk around barefoot. I'm like, man, I feel like, yeah, it's not as easy when I have this on, but I feel if I didn't use this, I'd have even less activation. So this is helping me when I take I take my shoes off and I walk around barefoot, whether I'm outside or I'm just walking around my house. I have to have a little bit more mental awareness of it. It's not a lot, but I do like this. Hands down, this helps when I take it out. Yeah, think of it. I wouldn't say support. I'm not trying to kind of nitpick it, Don, but think of it's just giving you feedback. It's not like,
Sure.
because like this would actually breed more dependence if you're like, hey, I have to have this rigid thing on because this is helping me. This is more of, you take this off. Well, now you have no idea how to activate your arches. We might have a little bit, but this is designed to it's teaching you how to activate your arches. It's not trying to force you into that arch position.
Good. And just for clarity for listeners, you described the one that was a very rigid piece that may have been, excuse me, holding up your arch, and the other one was a proprioceptive from the barefoot, company that you were talking about from Australia. Two completely different products. One building some support, and the other giving proprioceptive,
100%.
proprioceptive feedback.
Hey, Matt, I'm going to backtrack a little bit, and I'm the only one on the call that doesn't have any medical background here. So, Don, excuse me for this simple question. Is the arch a muscle? Is it made of muscle? Is it soft tissue, ligaments, tendons?
Yep.
Is it both? I mean, is it a muscle that we can exercise and strengthen and make it better, or is it just soft tissue?
So there's ligaments. There's a ligament called the spring ligament. That's pretty darn important for just having just maintaining the integrity of your arch. But a lot of it is through active muscles that support the arch. So there's a lot of ligamentous. I mean, there's numerous ligaments in there that help maintain the structure of your foot that are huge. The plantar fascia, this super robust fascia in our foot, that helps maintain it. So when someone tears their plantar fascia, they tend to have this, one foot will be normal or whatever their neutral arch is, and all of a sudden they have this plantar fascia tear, and then that foot's a heck of a lot flatter. So there's a lot of just tissue support. So yeah, I mean, the bones are there, but the ligaments support it. The plantar fascia is a massive supporter. The intrinsic foot muscles are a big supporter, but also there's two. Technically, it's technically three muscles. I guess there's more if you want to count some of the toe flexors, but it's almost like these are strings to a puppet. That one of them's it's that shin splint muscle on the inside. It wraps around the inside ankle bone, and that attaches to the bottom of your foot. That posterior tib tendon is huge for maintaining arch support. And that's actually, this little side note, I used to have, I recently had a posterior tib issue that I've been doing a lot of things to work on that. And the proprioceptive insole has really helped just help take care of that, because it just helped my arches activate and help put that in a good position. Now my post tib is able to pull the way it's supposed to. But the posterior tib muscle, and then there's two names. They're called the fibularis muscles on the outside. They wrap around the arch. They start on the calf and wrap around on the sides, and they give it some support as well. So it's definitely some static support from the ligaments and a little bit of the plantar fascia. But even the plantar fascia is more active when you bring your big toe up in the air. The muscles, the intrinsic foot muscles, get stretched. It creates tension, and then the plantar fascia gets tension. So when you're running or you're walking and you get that push off position, when you're pushing off, that big toe extends, and that creates a lot of stability. So yeah, the arch actually, it when you bring that big toe up, it becomes a lot stiffer. So it has there's a big role of how it becomes stiff and how it becomes more flexible. The muscles have a major role in that.
So I'm starting to understand this arch is really, really important for our running and for our mobility. And it sounds like it's made out of muscle and some soft tissue. So that means that there's some ways that we can strengthen or improve this important part of our body. What can we do besides using some kind of an insole that can activate or give us some proprioception? What are some other things that we can do? Can we, walk around more barefoot? Are there exercises? I'm thinking of our good friend Jay DeSherry, who's been on the podcast a number of times, and he developed this Mobo board. I don't know if does that help develop the arch development. What are some things that we can do to improve our arches?
I'm a huge fan of it. It is a great tool. It's on my list of doctor approved. I have on my link in the bio. I have doctor approved products. That is one of them. It's fantastic. I highly recommend it. Anybody who doesn't know what the mobile board is, check it out. Don't get the knockoff one because those break. It's more expensive, but it's worth it. What was the question again, Scott? How do we activate the arches? Right? How do we do that?
How do we strengthen it? How do we improve our arches? So we know that if the arch isn't working right, we can have some of these chronic issues, plantar fasciosis, shin splints,
Yep.
all the other things that we talked about. We don't want that to happen anymore. So we're going to focus on the arch. What are some exercises or things that we can do to help?
We can at least go over three big
arches?
ones. Number one is just getting the arch active by using the big toe. So when you could be standing, you could be seated, you could be standing on one leg, brushing your teeth, doing your dishes. Just focus on pressing the big toe into the ground. And think of it too. I'm going to do a demonstration, but if you're just listening to this and you can't, there's no visual, just think about it this way. Like, you don't want to scrunch your toe. Like, you don't want to you don't want to bend it. You want to press the big toe straight down into the ground. That's going to help the big toe, it's special from the other four toes. Like, the pinky toe technically has its own muscles, but it's not as important. But the big toe, it has it's larger. It has its own muscles. And just to drive this point home, which I promise I'm going to answer it, Scott, but this has got me sidetracked. The big toe has its own muscles, where the other four toes don't have nearly as many. They share a common tendon or they share a common muscle, that splits off into different tendons. But the big toe it's called a sesamoid bone. We spoke about kneecaps earlier, Don. The big toe at the base of it, at the base of the first metatarsal, essentially the ball of the foot where the big toe connects to it, has these two bones. They're called sesamoid bones, and a muscle called the flexor hallucis brevis. All it is it's the muscle that what I just talked about, that presses your big toe into the ground. That muscle, it's one muscle. It splits into two tendons, and those tendons go through those sesamoid bones. They're just like little small kneecaps. Those bones are the only reason that they're there, Scott, is to provide more mechanical advantage, just an improved lever arm for that big toe to smash into the ground. So our body's literally telling us, we evolved into being able to say, when we are on our feet, when we're bipedal, when we're walking, running, cutting, jumping, we need to be pressing our big toe into the ground. Like, there's no reason for those bones being there's a couple reasons. A tendon goes between them. Okay, that's fine. Actually, it's a little like an arch between them. But it's the same thing as your kneecap. Actually, I had a patient. I was a student back in Buffalo, New York. I will never forget this. She was 67 years old. When she was younger, 10 years old, she shattered her kneecap playing hopscotch or something. And the doctor, the ortho, instead of trying to heal it and replace it, I don't even know what they do with a broken knee. I think they just heal it. But she shattered her so bad, they took it out. So she doesn't have a kneecap on that side, and she will never be able to straighten her knee again. And we can do all the quad strengthening in the world, but if you don't have that kneecap, it really influences and negatively impacts the ability of your quad muscles to have a good pull on the lower leg. So those sesamoid bones do the exact same thing. They give that flexor hallucis brevis muscle the lever arm and mechanical advantage it needs to drive your big toe into the ground. So this is a long-winded way, Scott, of saying the best way to get your arch active and to work on it is to press your big toe into the ground. And the mobile board, that's why it's designed the way it is, because it wants you to press the big toe down. But the mobile board's great. Feel free to get it. But you can do this while standing, while seated. Just bring the big toe up and then press it down. Try and hold 3 to 5 seconds and do a set of 10 on each side. And kind of what you guys were doing with the toe yoga, you'll be able to find out, hey, which side's stronger? Which side do I feel it more? And actually look at your foot too. If you're seated, you can see, oh, it's actually rising. It's not. And actually, I love to do this with hey, someone's coming in with plantar fasciosis, and now on that side, they don't have as good a balance. They're not able to press the big toe down as aggressively. I'm like, hey, these are all indicating to me that if we improve your arch activation to get your big toe to improve that press down, this is probably going to help your plantar fascia, which it gets a lot. People are like, oh my gosh, never thought of that. Well, this is a great way to start to tie this into any issues you may have. So if you know you have a tweaky knee, a tweaky Achilles, whatever it is, hey, see if there's a difference from side to side. And this might be a factor in that.
Yeah, it starts with the foundation, and that your arch is a foundation or your foot, and you can chase that symptom or that problem all the way up the chain, up to the shin, to the knee, to the hip, to the back. I mean, there needs to be, that's the best place for evaluation. And and it makes complete sense to try to repair or rehab it and see if that helps with the problem that you're having.
Sorry, go ahead.
So my question is, I don't see these anymore. Stability shoes. Are they still selling the running stability shoe? You mentioned it earlier when you were younger and in cross country or running. They said, here are your selection of shoes. They're over here on this side. Yeah. They're not real cool looking, and they're not as looking as fast as the other ones you can buy, but you need this stability shoe, usually heavier and a lot stiffer.
Yeah, I believe.
Do we see those anymore?
I don't go out to like search for them when I go to like our local shoe store. I know they definitely still make them. I will say this about it though. There is the whole shoe companies don't like me for this. I guess that's fine. But the whole idea of you have a high arch, you need to get this cushion shoe. That's actually, I'm not totally against that, but we can do better. If you have a neutral foot, you need this neutral shoe. If you have a really flat foot over pronated shoe or foot, you need this stability shoe. There's actually zero evidence that shows that, hey, if you're in this like super stiff shoe, that it's actually, or like the supportive shoe, that it's actually going to decrease your risk of injury if you have a flatter foot or you're overpronate. There's very little to no research that shows that this is actually going to help prevent injuries and help you help you from getting aches and pains. So the whole idea of, you have a high arch, you need this really cushiony shoe, and you have this really flat foot, you need this supportive shoe. It doesn't hold up when we start to test this. Instead of that, if you want to get a product, get a proprioceptive insole. But even that's not gonna. I mean, if you just put that in, like, you still have to learn how to press the big toe down, how to do toe yoga, which essentially the next one, Don, is like the short foot exercise, which is you press the big toe down and you actively try to raise your arch up. And I stare at it too when I do it. I first learned to do this. Press the big toe down and just try to raise the arch up as high as you can. You're trying to like bring the heel and the ball of foot closer together. That's the second one I tend to get people is, once we get you pressing down, let's try to raise the arch up after you learn how to press down.
I don't think I've ever had a need to try to raise my arch up and do that exercise. It would be interesting to give it a try.
Hey, Matt, I am so glad that you said that about shoes, because I know people that work in shoe stores know what a pronation, supination, flat foot, high arch, all that stuff. I have no idea what my foot looks like, and it has never made a decision on what shoe I buy. I buy the shoe that I like, that looks the coolest, and it seems to be working. It seems to be working for me. So I'm actually glad that it's not that crucial of a decision when we're making a shoe choice to know what's our foot look like, what does it do, what are its weaknesses, what are its strengths, and go from there. Am I right in saying that? Is that what you said?
Yeah, and think of like,
okay, good, because that's what I heard.
Think of like, if you have
that's what I wanted to hear.
Not shoes are not inherently bad. There's different kinds of shoes, and like I have the prop, I have the Hoka out of my head of props, and like when you have a shoe like this, there's a lot of cushion in it, a lot of, we call it stack height, and like, well, how does that differ from like a zero shoe? Well, this shoe, it's almost like you're on a marshmallow. It's really hard to get that feedback from your foot to your brain. So what tends to happen is when you have a shoe like this Hoka, not that it's a bad shoe, but it tends to not use your foot as much. There's a curve here in the front that helps you push off. There's a heel rocker as well. If you land heel strike, it just makes that kind of that rocking through motion a little bit easier. Like the cushion and the way these shoes are designed, it helps offload your body, especially your foot, where you just don't have to work as hard. When you're in a shoe like this Zero, there's a prerequisite requirement of you just have to have some level of big toe usage and arch activation. This is most likely, I mean, I can't imagine why else this would have happened. But when Vivo, the barefoot shoes came out, I was in high school, I think, in 2008, 2009. And my best friend had those 5-finger shoes. And my parents bought me the knockoff Feel of 4 Fingers, which you guys haven't seen those. Check those out. The Feel of, it was the pinky toe and the
four fingers?
Fourth toe were combined. It was really funky because they didn't want to buy the Vivo 5 Fingers. But like, why didn't I ran like 10 miles in the first day. I was like, oh shoot, my ankle is not feeling too hot. Like, why did I get injured? Why did so many runners have problems when they just jumped into it? Well, they're used to this shoe that has the cushion. It helps you rock through. Your foot did not have to work nearly as hard versus when you made that transition to this. It's just a shock to the system, and your body especially your foot was not prepared to put the work in to have you handle like that 200% of your body weight when you're running.
So I'm a trail runner, and I have a goal of running a long race, and you define long in your own terms. Am I at risk training only in a Hoka, a shoe with high stack height, and I'm not getting the proprioception that otherwise I would with a minimalist shoe? Should I mix my training so I don't decondition my foot and then ask it to do a very long run?
I think it's right. If we look at the extreme of like if you only ran in these shoes, Don, and the Hokas, right, the high stack height foam cushion shoes, and you never did any like arch activation or walking around barefoot or running in a barefoot shoe, like I mean over time you're definitely going to decondition your foot. You're definitely at risk of that. And the problem with that is, well, now it affects your balance. Your arch is a big proponent of balance. As we age, I'm almost 30, so I'm getting older. We tend to lose balance, and it could be a life-saving, skill and trait to have. Is you have good balance. Like it's when you're 60, 70, 80 years old, we're not going to fall, break a hip because you have pretty solid balance. So essentially, that's like kind of one extreme of it. But yeah, if you wear Hokas, like if you love them, I'm not saying you have to transition out of them, but I think make sure we're doing some toe activation, short foot exercise. Stand on one leg, press the big toe down, and pass the weight from side to side. Doesn't have to be heavy, but just get some arch activation work in. And yeah, I recommend doing some things barefoot, whether you're walking around barefoot, you have some lower mileage days where you want to get some running, not just barefoot, but running in a shoe like a Zero. I think they would be beneficial. But I'm not trying to criticize Hoka. It's just these shoes that sometimes if you have a really hot plantar fascia issue, you got a marathon coming up in 2 weeks and you're typically wearing a low stack shoe, hey, but getting one of these will probably help you get through that race. But yeah, essentially, I would recommend getting some level of barefoot activation in, even if you wear a shoe like a Hoka.
You talk about proprioception. Let's talk about the wobble board. I would imagine that you have a strong opinion, or it might be on your doctor approved list. I don't know. Let's talk about a wobble board and how it can affect us as runners. If it's a tool we should think about.
What is a wobble board?
Is this the one with it's got the ball, like half ball on the bottom of it? Yeah. So I used to, right. I think that when I first became a PT, a physical therapist, the first clinic I worked at had one. They also had like that blue square. If you guys have ever seen that when you go to PT, it's like a blue square foam. Definitely don't use the blue square foam thing because you're literally on a marshmallow and your foot has no idea what's going on. It's not a good balance trainer. The wobble board's great. I'm a big fan of it. I mean, it's press the big toe down on the board. You can pass the weight from side to side. You can press weight like one weight overhead. Like you're getting that. Do an RDL, a single leg RDL on it. I love doing that. I'll be quite honest with you. Instead of having the wobble board, Don, I own 3 mobile boards, one in each of our locations, because it's just to me it's a very specific. It's a better wobble board that's designed to help turn your feet on. Like there's cutouts for your big toe and the other 4 toes. Like it is specifically designed to help your arches activate. So I don't even buy a wobble board. I just own 3 mobile boards that anytime working on balance, we go to the mobile board because to me it's just the best tool for the job, or one of the better tools for the job of to help get your foot active.
I can tell a story about a friend of mine, Bob Powers, that for years he had a fairly severe ankle injury when he was playing football, the old story, a football injury, and it recovered and healed up, but he had some stiffness, but some proprioceptive problems where when he'd go out on a run on the trail, he would roll that ankle 4 to 5 times per run. Just that was the usual for him because he lost some of that awareness, position awareness or spatial awareness of during that run. Then he started using a wobble board, retraining and reteaching that ankle where it was in space and where the weight was distributed and what muscles needed to contract to help bring him back to center. And all these things happen in real time when you're running. As you're moving along, the foot hits the ground and realizes, hey, we need to pull a little more this way, or this ankle's going to roll. So he couldn't catch the ankle in time before it would roll. Because his proprioception improved, the feedback came back quick and the muscles contracted to help keep that ankle in the right position. So for him, which was a lifetime of, I roll my ankles every time I run, he ended up working on the wobble board. He had one at work, he had one at home. And when he had the opportunity, he would get on it, practice balance. And then that cured his problem of rolling ankles repetitively on these runs, retraining that proprioceptive feedback in that loop that happens. So, there's a chance for, as we talk about arches, yes, we can strengthen them. Yes, we can improve proprioception. Yes, we can do toe yoga. Yes, there's a lot of things that we can do that make us better runners. And Scott, maybe even better people.
Hey, I just want to put a plug in here, and we'll make sure we say this at the end of the episode. We'll put it in the show notes too. Kudos to Jay DeSherry for inventing the Mobo board in his basement garage. But he was kind enough to give Trail Runner Nation listeners, there's a 10% off code that you can use. You can go to trailrunnernation.com and click the deals page, scroll all the way to the bottom, and there's a code there that you can get if you haven't used it before. I need to use the tools I have, Matt. I'm interested with this activating arch that you talked about from Barefoot Science. I have my mobile board within arm's reach of myself right now in my office, and I don't use it as often as I should. And so I think it's a good idea to use some of these tools that you're talking about and to make sure that we're taking care of our feet.
Matt, you've written this book, Built to Run, and it's a great book. And our other podcast talked about different chapters and some of the content. And now you've written another book that speaks about the arch and the foot. Were you able to fill a book up with information? Why did you decide that, you know what, I need to dedicate a book from the ankle down and
so it's share
not
us yet,
share
Don.
that
It's
in
the early stages, so it's getting there. But to me, it's like Built to Run was definitely it was a passion project of like I had the idea for a while. I had the idea for a book on arches and flat feet. I actually had that idea first, but I felt like I had to do the running one first. There's a lot of info in Built to Run. Like, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of info in there that's going to help a lot of people just turn your arches on. But I just knew looking at it, I'm like, learning to write a book. Essentially I was taught like each chapter, like you don't like sometimes like people want to include all these things in chapters and like, dude, that chapter could be its own book in and of itself. And I felt like that's how the arch chapter was. I just didn't want to make it a 200-page arch chapters. And there's still more things that I want to research and look up as well to include in it. So I know there's more stuff I can include in there, but at that point I'm like, there's enough in Built to Run where it's going to help a lot of people. But yeah, the next step, the next creative endeavor is to create is work on this next book, and that's all going to be all about arches and how to activate your arches and just kind of expand upon Built to Run. So highly recommend if you're like, hey, I want to learn more about the arch activation. Built to Run has a great amount of info on there. And essentially what I've been doing, Don and Scott, if as long as you're cool with me guys saying this, anybody who gets the book, it is 20% off.
Yeah.
We give you a free sticker that has like the logo of the book on it. I think it's pretty cool. But also you get added to I have a free newsletter that goes out every week, every Monday at 10 a.m. where I get free newsletter where I just expand upon things that I couldn't include in the book, or expand upon things that were in the book. I want to add more detail to it. But in that email list, the people in that newsletter are going to get first access to the book and also get a discount on purchasing that book when it comes out, which whether that's in a year or 2 or 3 years, it's with a baby on the way. I got to figure some things out with the holidays. But that's the kind of, it's right. You get the book, you get the free newsletter, and you'll have access to any future products that we make or any future books. Like I have a lot of ideas for the flat foot kind of arch book, and I'm very excited about it.
So, doctor, if I come into your clinic and I say, yeah, I'm a runner, and I point to some knee pain that I have on the inside of my knee, and I show you, and you start to evaluate me, how quickly or how soon do you look at my arch? Or do you concentrate
it's in the
completely on my
assessment.
knee?
So essentially what I'll do is like the top 5 things I look at. What does your squat look like? What's your forward bending look like? What's your backwards bending look like? What's your rotation, full body rotation? And the last thing is, what does your balance look like? These are all things we break out of. If your squat looks a certain way, if you lean too far forwards, maybe your ankle's tight. Or if you're shifting off to the side, it cues me where else I want to look. When we look at balance, if you have a lot of like shifting from your hip or shifting side to side from your body, that lets me know it's probably from your hip and maybe some glute weakness or core weakness. But if I see your foot doing a whole lot of wobbly like this, that is a lot of foot arch activation and ankle control. So I can pick up on that really quick, and then we'll dive in deeper of like, why does your single leg balance look like this, especially with your eyes closed? And then we can specifically test the arch. So if someone's standing on one leg and they're barefoot, they have no problem standing. I'm like, we can look at the arch, but it's probably not a big contributing factor to your knee pain. So that's probably the easiest way I find how can we quickly screen out if the arch is contributed to your knee pain? Well, we look at balance, and if you're all over the place, Don, then with your foot, hey, we're gonna check this out. Let's see what your arch is actually doing.
Well, and that's how important it is to go to a functional clinician, somebody that understands the big picture and doesn't say, yeah, well, let's get an x-ray of that, or if that doesn't work, maybe we'll go further and get an MRI and figure out what's going on with this. But taking a look at the whole kinetic chain, figuring out why you might be having that chronic pain in that knee, and before that joint wears out, before the meniscus decides to throw up the white flag and surrender because it has had this mechanical problem for many years, you're getting in there, identifying it, correcting that before you run out of time for the structure that's getting the fatigue in the knee. You've got to figure that out, straighten that out, so that you can keep what you have and not need to either retire or replace it.
The body is a system, and I don't know I think we're probably out of time, but if your knee caves in when you're running, your arch is going to collapse. The arch is influenced by the architecture above it. So your knee position, your hip position, if your back is really stiff, and essentially a lot of things can happen where if my back is stiff, I can kick out to the side when I run, and I'll load one side more. If your hip doesn't have the strength or the motor control, your knee might cave in. That can affect your arch height. So there's so many things that can affect this. So I mean, when we're evaluating somebody, we have to take this full body approach and not just, you have knee pain, let's get an MRI. Well, yeah, that could tell me the integrity of the meniscus, but why is your meniscus flared up in the first place? Like I care a lot more about that, because meniscus has the potential to heal. Some of it has blood flow, some of it gets nutrients from compression and decompression of the knee. So our body is this amazing tool, Don and Scott, and it does frustrate me when someone's like, which I don't get this much anymore, but when I first started the business, it's like, oh, I got this MRI in my knee, I don't know if I need PT, doc said I need surgery. I'm like, well, unless it's like locking and you really can't even walk on it at all, like maybe go see surgery. But if you're able to walk and just it causes you pain when you run or lift, like come on in, we can probably actually find out what's going on.
And importantly, find out what's going on. Even if you need it replaced, figure out why you need it replaced. Maybe you can correct some of that stuff before going through the replaced knee that they put you in. It's important to clean up some of those biomechanics. So if I'm listening to this, I'm saying, man, where does Matt work? How can I get in to see him? Where are your offices?
In Frederick. Essentially, we're in Maryland. Our main office is in Gaithersburg, Maryland. This is actually my home office. I treat out at Frederick 1 or 2 days a week. And then we also have an office inside of a CrossFit gym in Columbia. So if you're in the area, we get people that are local. We get people that drive like from Pennsylvania. I have a few patients that drive a good hour to come work with us. It's because there's not a whole lot of PTs that kind of work the way we do. But you'd be surprised, Don and Scott, we get a lot of virtual patients. One of our team members, Dr. Rochelle, she's recently going to get a lot of virtual patients is because we've had a lot of people reach out where they're in California or they're in someone's from like New Brunswick, say somewhere in Canada where we can't really call it physical therapy per se, but hey, we can definitely work on some things to get you running better and look at your running form and get your arches active. So we do a good chunk of our client caseload just with virtual clients as well.
Fantastic. So go ahead, Scott. I think you're going to be asking for a link, or how do we find that if we're in California?
Exactly. What do we do if we want a virtual
just check out,
consult?
It's alphaprojectphysio.com, and physio it's PHYZIO, but alphaprojectphysio.com. It directs you right to, hey, schedule a free phone call. I do all the phone calls, which is my job. Is I just want to make sure, I want to find out what do you have going on. Are you in the right place? And if I think we can help, I'll let you know kind of what that looks like, how we can help. So that's kind of on that side. And then if you guys are also interested in getting the book, you can get it on Amazon. The only issue with that is it's just, I can't really follow up with you or add you to the newsletter. Oh, well, they're also all signed if you get from us too. I forgot to mention that. So you get a signed copy if you get it from us. But yeah, if you want to get the book, it's just if you Google Alpha Project Physio Built to Run or just Built to Run book, it should be one of the top links. And then, yeah, you can buy it right from us and yeah, check it out. It was a passion project. Took like 3 years to make it, but especially when we talk about arches and arch control, I haven't seen a whole lot of literature and just books on this. And Built to Run has I believe it's chapter 5, has a lot of info of what we talked about today of how to get your foot active. And I do think it is this. It's a low hanging fruit that even if you put a little bit of work into this, you can get a lot of reward from just balance and just running more efficiently and just being healthier, a healthier foot, healthier human being.
One of the other easy things you can do is just follow Matthew on his social media. I was just watching one of his short reels on Instagram that talked about these barefoot science orthotics, and that's where my eyes kind of went, whoa, these look a lot different than the things I've seen in the stores before. So Matt, I will tell you, I am recommitted. There's a lot of golden nuggets we learned from you today, but I am recommitting myself to doing some toe yoga and really focusing on strengthening my arch. I don't really right now, knock on wood, There's no wood around, but pretend I'm knocking. Don't have any overuse issues right now, but I have, and most of us have. And so I think that by doing some preventative maintenance and doing some toe yoga, getting on a mobile board and doing some strengthening exercises, I think is good. I also loved your idea that maybe you should have a quiver of shoes, have some barefoot shoes to go out and do some shorter runs in, and then your regular shoes. I think that there's some benefit in doing that as well. So thank you so much for coming on.
I appreciate it. It's always fun being on this podcast. I thoroughly enjoy. I think the conversations are great. You guys are a pleasure to talk to.
Well, we act like a podcast host. More importantly, put on your shoes and go out and run.
Mas.